If you ever felt you didn't quite fit into God's plan of redemption for this world, then this week's message just might speak to you. As we continue through Luke chapter 1, we come across verses 36 through 38 where Gabriel is just finishing speaking to Mary. And we've talked about the encounter Gabriel had with Zechariah, telling him about John the Baptist's birth. And we've talked about Mary and the news that Jesus was going to be born. And in this finishing sentences, Gabriel tells Mary about the fact that Elizabeth is going to have a child who is John the Baptist. And he says it in a certain way that kind of made a connection moment, a connect the dots deal for me in my head. And I just want to share that with you this week. You see, he says that even Elizabeth, your relative, is going to have a child in her old age. And she who is said to be unable to conceive is in her 6th month. For no word from God will ever fail. And I got to thinking about the parallels between Elizabeth and Mary. They're the same, yet they're different. They're two people who never expected to have this encounter with God or to be used by God in his eternal plan of redemption for this world. Yet they both were. Yet they were both in very, very different places in their life. As we talked about Elizabeth, and even Gabriel says it, she's old. They thought they were never going to have any kids. But yet here comes this blessing of a child when she thinks her life is basically done with, over, used up, that it's just not going to happen. Maybe gave up on that dream. But God stepped into her life and changed all that. And she was able to have this son, John the Baptist, whose mission on earth was just to point the way to Jesus. And then we have Mary in the same time period. We've talked about that she was young. Maybe some might say too young. She wasn't married. She wasn't ready yet. She had no idea what was to come in her life. And if she did, it certainly was not that she was going to give birth to the Savior of the world. Yet God entered her life. She had an encounter with God. And all of a sudden she's in a totally different direction. Maybe a direction that wasn't comfortable, but certainly a direction that was led by God. So it occurred to me that, these different people, and you and I as well, maybe we don't expect that encounter from God or expect to be part of his plan of redemption. But all of a sudden, bang, we have that moment and he changes our life in a way. But he wants something from us. And I think Mary is a great example of this in verse 38. She says, I'm your Lord's servant. May your word to me be fulfilled. I'm your Lord's servant. Man, God just wants our obedience when he calls us. He wants us to take action on the mission he gives us or what he puts on our heart. He needs us to step out and do his work in this world through faith or trust in him. And it happens all the time. And I just want to encourage you that if you get that feeling, maybe just to say something to somebody or do something nice for your neighbor or anything like that, just be obedient to that calling and just go ahead and step into it. I think, God's plan is so amazing because neither one of these people knew the plan he had for their life, which is a kind of small plan overall. But when you think about their children, it was part of a much bigger story, the redemption of the world, right? Jesus was going to change everyone's relationship with God. And Mary was a part of that. And God's plan is scalable. It's so vast. It's intimate. It's all these things at one time. And all he's looking for from us is just to jump on board with his eternal plan and maybe sacrifice our personal plan for a little while. We'll catch you next week on Wednesday Wisdom.